First of all, let me just say, I've just found this to be a practically thrilling day, just fabulous discussions, and I think a lot of progress on both getting to know each other and coming up with things to work on together, and also the discussion sections and the keynotes and so on were just really inspiring. So I just want to thank you all for all of that. So I'm going to just take a minute here, not too long, but I could go on for a while. I've gotten to know our governor, Governor Mark Gordon, and I might go on for a while. You never know when I get start talking. But no, I'm going to be disciplined, I promise. So it is my pleasure to introduce someone I would say has become my friend in a very short time here, Mark Gordon, who is our governor, who's going to talk some about the Wyoming innovation economy and a lot of the work we've been doing together since I got here in Wyoming, of course, building on a lot of work before that. And Governor Gordon has worked not only very closely with the university, but with the community colleges. And I know we're going to hear from him about his views on innovation in the state and also the role that all of higher education can play. And under his leadership, we formed a thing called the Wyoming Innovation Partnership. And I know the governor will talk about. He's got a distinguished career in serving Wyoming as state treasurer, where he transformed and modernized Wyoming's financial system. And we have a lot of opportunities for the future around finance. And we have a session tomorrow on the future of finance. And in fact, a lot of discussion there. And as governor, he's focused on creating more opportunities for people to live and work in our wonderful state. And I, having been here only 2 years, I do feel like it is now my wonderful state. I love it here. And ensuring that our workforce has the skills that they need for jobs in the industries of today and into the future. In my discussions with Governor Gordon around economic development, when I was interviewing here, in fact, 2.5 years ago, almost now. By the way, I moved here with Gabrielle 2 years ago, 2 days ago. So been here, I'll start my 3rd year in July. But I can tell you that it was one of the reasons I was very excited about coming here from the very beginning. And so we had good conversations right from the beginning. In fact, I remember in the interview, you asked me to describe my sense of humor. Do you remember that? And I'm like, it's surprising. Let's put it that way. You don't expect a guy with black hole to works on black holes to have a sense of humor. So anyway, so the governor has spearheaded efforts to diversify Wyoming's economy and technology, finance, agriculture, energy, research, education, tourism, carbon capture and sequestration. And he can talk at length about all of these topics. He's really very knowledgeable and helps drive agendas on these things. So his leadership led to the recently formed Wyoming Innovation Partnership that I'm sure he's going to mention. And let me just say a couple words about that. It is a collaboration between the state of Wyoming and all of the institutions of higher education here in the state, at least publicly funded ones, the university and all of the community colleges, as well as our business council, workforce development, and really it's an all-in-state effort that I think is unusual. I hope you will see it as a national model. And it emphasizes important growth areas in the state of Wyoming, including computing, technology, entrepreneurship and innovation, and tourism and other areas. So anyway, the governor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be here and add that, you know, I remember 2 years ago and 2 days ago, we were so delighted to have you that I think we introduced you to COVID and said, here's a university that you have to run in all of that. And you've done a phenomenal job and really a great pleasure. You know, Gabrielle, I don't know if you actually signed up for all the fun, but as a spouse of a leader, you know, you get to share in the joy that and the really positive comments that people often deliver. But I have to say that you know, Ed has been really a wonderful influence on Wyoming, and he's come at just the right time, in my opinion. So just a little bit of history in Wyoming. It's often referred to, in fact, this university, we all talk about, sort of the cowboy ethic and how important that is. You live by, live each day with courage, take pride in your work. When you make a promise, keep it. All these various comments that we make that sort of define what a cowboy in Wyoming is. But Wyoming wasn't always a cowboy culture. Wyoming actually was built by people who came here, saw this place. The railroad was coming west, and it stopped at a little place called Hell on Wheels, which you may remember from a TV show. And Hell on Wheels was what would become Cheyenne. It was the place that you disembarked from the train to go up into the gold fields of the Black Hills. But it was also a place where an enterprising young officer found a way to beat all the other railroads. The railroad originally was going to go up to the center of the state and then out west, and it was a big race. But they found what's called the gangplank. So just east of here was a grade perfect for the railroad engines of the time to be able to carry a train up and over the pass and down into Laramie and on out west, which is why we arrived first with the Transcontinental Railroad on this line. So I hope the Union Pacific is here and we can say that, we gave you a shout out. But in fact, the people that did that were enterprising. They were entrepreneurs. They saw opportunity. They wanted to make their way, and they wanted to make something out of their time. So what is interesting is that tradition prevails today, and I think it prevails in a really remarkable way here in Wyoming on this day with this room with all these people here. And I'll tell you why. It is because we have arrived at a time in our history where it seems impossible to be able to go up over the pass. A lot of people are sort of struggling with ideas about climate, about what we do with hydrology, about what we do with workforce, about what we do with education, about what we do to power our nation. And the simple answers just are not sufficing. You know that. What do you do about water? We know the context of energy has been essentially solved. We know that there are renewable sources. We know that there are nuclear sources. We know that there are legacy sources of energy that we can develop. But we can't probably do it the same way as we have done in the past. We know that climate is changing, and we know that we can maybe have some effect on it. But if you really look at the science, it's a little bit hard to know exactly how predictable our efforts are going to be or how aggressively we need to address those issues and what the impact is going to be. So there's some challenges that we have to deal with there. We have to sort of understand what that economy is going to look like and how people are going to be rewarded for the work they do. All of these things come together really in this conference that you're talking about. But have no fear. It is fascinating to me that our history actually can give us some great indications of what's to come. I started as a little camp boy. My mother grew up in Kennebunk, Maine. I started as a little camp boy in Maine, and I made a lifelong friendship with a guy named Amory Lovins, who in 1979 wrote a book called Soft Energy Paths, which was sort of the first analysis about what the energy future might look like. Now, Amory over the years has constantly talked about renewables as an alternative, not from necessarily an environmental standpoint, but for just straight up economics. And he's always been very aggressive about how he sees those economics working out. But the fact of the matter is many of the things that Amory talked about in 1979 were sort of presaged during the early 1980s. We had a lot of solar development. In fact, really remarkable types of development for wind energy were first sort of envisioned during the 1980s. They kind of went away during the 1990s, and they've come back. Now, what's the moral of this story? In 1980, in Medicine Bow, Boeing and Hamilton Standard put up wind generators that were huge by the time, at the time, but much smaller than what we see today. Everybody laughed because it would never be economic to develop wind with those things because they were throwing blades and nothing really seemed to be able to stand in place. But over time, of course, that technology advanced. The thing that we deal with today is how do we find a 24/7 source of dependable energy for being able to fill in the intermittency of renewables. We know renewables have a place. Wyoming, we love this because if you're going to do anything in energy, it's going to be here in Wyoming. We have wind, obviously, to the east. We have nuclear being developed thanks to Bill Gates and thanks to Rocky Mountain Power and thanks to the Department of Energy, really looking at a new generation of nuclear power, which we can talk about for innovation in a moment. Out to the west. And then, remarkably, there's actually a solution to CO2 in the atmosphere, which is sort of right here in Wyoming, but it takes, and people sort of discount it now saying it's way too expensive, and yet the technology exists and it's just a matter of trying to figure out how we put it in place and what the cost is. So that's carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, and particularly, if you look at being able to incorporate a certain amount of biomass, which can be grown, can be harvested from our forests, and you put that together with coal and have new generations of technology that allow the coal to burn cleaner, capture most of that carbon dioxide, turn it either into products that Wyoming, the University of Wyoming has really led the way on, from everything from construction to asphalt to carbon rods and all of the various things that we can envision coming out of using this new source of energy wisely. And, lo and behold, we can actually remove biologically and otherwise the carbon dioxide. And then you look at the potential for geologic sequestration. And here's where my friends from NCAR come in, and the University of Wyoming. Geologic sequestration in Wyoming is one of two states that has primacy to be able to do this. So the challenge of doing this in a way that is safe for generations to come is really something that Wyoming wants to focus on. And it is something that Wyoming uniquely is able to model better than anyone else. And perhaps you've had a chance to see the high bay. Okay, so the high bay is this remarkable laboratory that has from an atomic scale, was nano a few years ago. Now it's atomic all the way through field scale. You're able to model what happens to fluids in porous media in a way that no one else in the world can do. So you're sitting in Wyoming on the opportunity to solve energy, climate at the same time. It's just our imagination and our ingenuity that holds us back. And again, let me back up for a second. It's so funny because in my time, before I was treasurer, I was on the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. And I remember the sort of first moments where people started talking about ESG, environment, social, and governance investing, and how important that was to sort of crafting a future that was beneficial for humanity, for the world, for the environment. And it started getting its steps, but it was easy. People, let's not burn coal, let's use renewables. This is the way forward, and we'll drive investment that way. And in time, it has come to pass. But in Wyoming, the challenge is with the amount of wind that's being developed, we're losing a lot of our landscape. With what we see with coal, we're abandoning the potentials there for being able to be realistic about doing carbon capture and sequestration. And we're a bit myopic about how we approach that future. So I grew up on a ranch. I remember when people said cows overgrazed, there were two things you did. If cows were overgrazing, you would reduce the number of cows that were on the pasture. Simple enough, two-dimensional kind of solution. The interesting thing is that in Europe, they were saying, well, you reduce the time that the cows are on that landscape. And then lo and behold, the third thing is you sort of understand how plant physiology works. Now you put all of these things together and you have a grazing system that is not two-dimensional, but is three-dimensional and really talks about how you get more productive grasslands in a way that we, as American range science and European range science alone could not figure out, which is why having a world discussion on this is so important. And then the last piece of this that I really think is important is that there has been so much wealth generated from mineral development. It really has done more to lift boats everywhere than anyone can imagine. And it is by far the best source of wealth generation. And there have been some issues associated with it. I'm not disagreeing with that one bit. I think the responsibility now is how do we take that wealth and deploy it in a way that really is able to be transformational to not only society, but to our world going forward. And there, what is interesting is that the wealth that is stored in sovereign funds from places like Saudi Arabia, Wyoming, Alaska, and elsewhere is something that I've brought up to the Milken organization. How do we collaboratively, without finding villains and without finding necessarily heroes that we want to elevate above everyone else, how do we incorporate all of this into a way forward that means people have better jobs, better standards of living, better healthcare, cleaner sources of energy, and just a better place to raise your kids? So no pressure here. We're all looking at you to do that. But as Ed said, we've taken a couple of first steps here in Wyoming. One of them is this Wyoming Innovation Partnership. And Wyoming is a very small state from the point of view of population, about almost a little bit less than 600,000. We were 588 and we went down and everybody thought we were great. And so they started moving here. And so, it's a sort of a moving target. But the fact of the matter is that we have a phenomenal university, one university, and we have phenomenal community colleges. We have what, 9? It's 8? 8 community colleges scattered around. And we uniquely can say, as a state, we can pivot across the spectrum of that educational experience in a way that meets the needs of industry, anticipates the evolution of new types of technology. And in fact, that's one of the things that I think we've really tried to focus in on is it's one thing to meet the needs of industry today, but it's much more interesting and much more fascinating to sort of anticipate what disruptive things can come, which you talked about today, what disruptive things can come and how we react to it. Now, our school system, our post-secondary education system can do that. It can do that on a, and I really sort of hate this notion that either you're going to college or you're going to go to career in tech, because the fact of the matter is, and we saw this in the 80s, people who were career and tech oriented often came up with remarkable ideas that nobody had anticipated in the academic realm. And now suddenly they want to put together a business and grow that business and make that business part of the future. And we can look at a number of examples, from anything from MySpace that turned into Facebook to even Microsoft. And so it's really hard to predict out of either of those ecosystems, either the academic or the CRT ecosystem, what's coming next. But we know we can adapt here in Wyoming quickly. We know that we can provide that education from a research level, which this university is, all the way down to making sure that our high school students are motivated with a career that they see a future in. So this is what the Wyoming Innovation Partnership is about. Ed and Dr. Caldwell have done a remarkable job of helping to sort of coordinate this effort as we go forward. And this discussion will inform part of what that means. So this is my sort of pep talk about how we have arrived at this place that feels like it's hard to find a way over the pass. But just like the Union Pacific Rodeo, that's Wyoming too. Railroad, there it is. Just like that, the paths are open to us. It's simply a matter of finding the way and accepting the opportunities that lie in front of us. Thank you.